the night Elaine's mother told me to either apologize or get out of her house. I did neither. I want to be clear about that. Because people hear a story like mine, and they assume the man either caved or exploded. They picture some dramatic scene. Raised voices, slammed doors, someone crying in a hallway. That's not what happened. What happened was quieter than that, and I think that's why it still stays with me. My name is Roger. I'm 53 years old. I spent 22 years working in project management for a mid-sized construction firm based out of Mississauga, Ontario. I'm not rich, but I'm comfortable. I own a house. I have a pension. I've never missed a mortgage payment in my life. I tell you this not to brag, but because it matters to the story. It matters a lot, actually. I met my wife, Elaine, in 2001 at a mutual friend's housewarming party in Hamilton. She was funny and sharp, and she had this way of cutting through small talk that I'd never seen in anyone before. We dated for 2 years, got engaged, got married in 2004. For the first few years, things were good. Not perfect, but good. Real. The kind of marriage where you argue about whose turn it is to call the plumber and then laugh about it later. The problem was never Elaine and me, not really. The problem was her family. Her mother, Maureen. Wait, no, I need to pick a different name. Her mother's name was Roberta. I'll call her Roberta, because that's what she was to me. Not some warm maternal figure, just a woman named Roberta who had decided, sometime before I ever walked through her front door, that I wasn't good enough for her daughter. Her father's name was Hugh. Hugh was quieter than Roberta, but in some ways more dangerous, because he delivered his contempt with a smile. He was a retired chartered accountant who'd done well for himself in the 90s, and he carried that success the way some men carry a weapon, always present, never holstered. Elaine had one sibling, a younger brother named Theo. Theo was 38, lived in Oakville, worked in sales, and had never held a job for longer than 2 years in a row as far as I could tell. But Theo was family. Theo was blood. And blood, in Roberta's world, covered a multitude of sins. The first time I noticed something was off. We'd been married less than a year. We were at Christmas dinner at Hugh and Roberta's place in Burlington, and Hugh asked me how work was going. I told him we'd just finished a major infrastructure project. A highway widening contract north of Barrie. He nodded slowly. The way you nod when someone tells you something you already knew wasn't impressive. Good, steady work, he said. Nothing wrong with steady. It sounds harmless. I know it sounds harmless. But it was the tone. It was the way steady came out of his mouth like a consolation prize. Like he was complimenting a child on finishing their vegetables. I let it go. Elaine hadn't reacted, and I told myself I was being sensitive. The second time, Theo and I were watching the Leafs game in the basement while the women cleaned up after dinner. And yes, in that house, it was always the women who cleaned up, which is a whole other story. And Theo asked me what I drove. I told him I had a 2006 Honda Pilot. He laughed. Not a mean laugh exactly, a surprised one. Like he couldn't believe I'd admitted to it. Still doing the Honda thing, he said. Fair enough, I let that go too. The third time, I stopped counting. By year 4 of our marriage, I had a sense of the pattern. I was tolerated at family events. I was included in the sense that a piece of furniture is included in a room. Present. Useful in a general way. Not particularly noticed unless something went wrong. Elaine's family talked around me, past me, occasionally at me when they needed something practical sorted out. If there was a leaky faucet at the Burlington house, Hugh would call me to come take a look. If Roberta needed help moving furniture before Easter, I was the first one she'd text. But at the dinner table, when the conversation turned to politics or money, or where the grandchildren would go to school someday, I was invisible. And Elaine, my wife, the woman I had built a life with, said nothing. I want to be fair to her here. I think she genuinely didn't see it for a long time. Or maybe she saw it and told herself it wasn't that bad. I've thought about this a lot in the years since everything fell apart, and I still can't fully separate what was blindness from what was cowardice. Maybe both. Probably both. What I know for certain is that I brought it up to her at least a dozen times over the years. Not always calmly. Sometimes I'd get home from one of her family's dinners with this tight feeling in my chest, like something was wound too tight and couldn't release, and I'd try to explain what I was feeling. And she'd say something like, "Roger, my mother is just old-fashioned." Or my dad doesn't know how to talk to people who didn't go to university. It's not personal. It's not personal. That sentence. I heard it so many times it lost its meaning entirely. By year 8, I'd stopped trying to connect with Hugh and Roberta. I showed up to family events because Elaine wanted me there, and I was pleasant, and I fixed things when they needed fixing, and I drove home afterward in silence. Elaine would sometimes put her hand on my arm in the car and say she appreciated me being there, and I'd nod, and we'd go home, and nothing would change. By year 12, I was barely speaking at family events at all. I'd learned to disappear into a glass of water and a chair in the corner. Less target surface that way. The annual Thanksgiving weekend at the family cottage on Georgian Bay was the event I dreaded most. Hugh and Roberta owned a property near Midland. Nothing fancy, an older place with a dock and 3 bedrooms that slept 8 if you didn't mind being uncomfortable. Every year, the whole family came up. Theo and his girlfriend of the moment, Elaine's aunts and cousins, occasionally a neighbor or two. Every year, I packed a bag and drove the 2 hours north and spent 4 days feeling like a guest who'd overstayed his welcome. The year everything changed, Theo had recently started a new job. He'd left his previous position, something in financial services, though I was never entirely clear what he actually did, and was now in digital marketing. I learned this at the cottage on the Friday evening, when Roberta announced it to the assembled family over a platter of charcuterie with the energy of someone revealing a Nobel Prize. Theo's been absolutely thriving, she said. He's going to be moving into his own place in the spring. We're so proud. I watched Theo absorb this praise with the comfortable ease of someone who'd never been starved of it. That's great, I said. I meant it. I had nothing against Theo personally. What is it? The digital marketing thing? Elaine's cousin asked. His name was Bradley. He was 26 and worked in tech in Waterloo and had the unearned confidence of someone who had never been wrong about anything. Content strategy, brand development, that kind of thing, Theo said. Cool, cool. Bradley nodded like he was evaluating a pitch deck. Then, because the universe has a sense of humor, Bradley looked at me. Roger, remind me what you do again? Project management, I said. Construction. Oh, right. He nodded slowly, the same nod as Hugh, years earlier. I recognized the shape of it. That's very grounded. You like it? I've been doing it for over 20 years, I said. So yes, that's impressive. Bradley said in the tone people use when they mean the opposite. I should have left it there. I almost did. But then Theo said, without looking at me, still picking at the cheese board. At least someone knows how to stick with something. It was the kind of comment that sits in the room for a second and makes everyone slightly uncomfortable. It was aimed at himself, technically. But it wasn't, and we all knew it. I said quietly, I think it takes a certain kind of person to keep starting over, takes another kind to build something. Theo's eyes came up from the cheese. Roberta's jaw tightened. What's that supposed to mean? Theo said. Nothing, I said. Just agreeing with you. There was a silence. Elaine was across the room, talking to her aunt. She'd missed the whole exchange. Roberta set down her wine glass. Roger, she said. And she said my name the way she always said it, with a very slight pause before it, like she was deciding whether I was worth addressing. I think you owe Theo an apology. I looked at her. For what? For the implication. I made a general observation about work styles. There was no implication. You made Theo feel small in his own family's home. With respect, Roberta, I said 2 sentences in response to a comment he made first. Hugh, from his chair in the corner, cleared his throat. Not to intervene, just to register that he was aware of what was happening and had decided that watching was sufficient. Roger. Roberta's voice was very even. This family doesn't do well with conflict. You have 2 options. You can apologize to Theo right now, in front of everyone, and we can all move on and enjoy the weekend. Or you can leave. The room was very quiet. I heard the dock creaking outside. A loon called somewhere on the water, and then it was quiet again. I looked at Elaine. She was still talking to her aunt. She hadn't heard, or she'd chosen not to hear. I genuinely don't know which, even now. I put my glass of water down on the table very carefully. Okay, I said. Thank you for clarifying. I went upstairs to the bedroom I shared with Elaine, took my bag from the closet, and started packing. Here is what I want you to understand about that moment. I wasn't angry. I know that sounds strange. I'd had 12 years of dinners and long weekends, and car rides home where I'd rehearsed the speech I might one day give, and now that the moment had arrived, the speech just didn't come. What I felt instead was something closer to clarity, like a fog had lifted, like I'd been standing in a room for a very long time that I should have left a long time ago, and someone had finally switched on a light so I could find the door. I didn't slam the bag. I folded my clothes the way I always fold them. I put my toiletries in the case. I checked that I had my wallet, my phone, my car keys. Elaine came upstairs about 10 minutes later. She looked at the bag, she said, "I'm leaving." "Roger, what happened?" "Your mother gave me two options. I chose a third. A third." She shook her head. "Roger, just, please come downstairs and talk to her. I've been talking to your family for 12 years, Elaine. I'm done talking. You're going to drive home? It's almost 9 o'clock, yes. This is." She stopped, pressed her fingers to her temple. "This is embarrassing. You understand that? You're embarrassing me in front of my entire family." And there it was. After 12 years, that was the sentence. Not, "What did they say to you?" Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Let me go down there and fix this. You're embarrassing me." I zipped my bag. "I'll see you at home," I said. I went downstairs. I walked through the kitchen, where Bradley was refilling his drink, and Theo was looking very carefully at the floor. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I walked out the front door of the cottage, put my bag in the back of my truck, and drove south in the dark. I made it to Barrie before I pulled over. Not because I was upset, exactly. Because something hit me on that stretch of highway, somewhere between the exit for Innisfil and the lights of the city coming up on the horizon. Something I hadn't let myself think in 12 years. I had been the only person in that family who made their lives easier. I was the one who drove 4 hours round trip to fix the dock when it needed repairs. I was the one who helped Roberta navigate the inheritance paperwork when her own mother passed, who sat with her at the kitchen table for 3 hours going through documents because Hugh said he was too tired. I was the one who'd lent Theo $4,000 in 2015 when he needed first and last on an apartment in a hurry. Money that was never repaid and never once mentioned again. I was the one who had spent 12 Thanksgiving weekends sleeping on a mattress that was too soft in a room that smelled like must, smiling at people who had decided before I arrived that I wasn't worth knowing, and the one time I said 2 sentences that made someone uncomfortable, I was given an ultimatum. I sat in that parking lot in Barrie for about 20 minutes. Then I drove home. The following Monday, I called a family lawyer. I want to be very clear about something. I did not call a lawyer in some grand premeditated act of revenge. I called a lawyer because I sat in my house that Sunday. Elaine had driven home Saturday morning, silent the whole way, and we had spent the rest of the weekend in a very polite and terrible quiet, and I looked around at the life I'd built, the house I'd put 12 years of mortgage payments into, the RRSP I'd been contributing to since I was 28, the equity we'd built up together, and I thought, if this is what things have become, what exactly are we doing here? The lawyer's name is not important. She was professional and thorough, and she explained my options clearly, which is something I'd been needing for a long time. I didn't file anything that week, or the week after. Elaine and I talked, the first real conversations we'd had in years, actually. She cried. I held her while she cried, because I still loved her. That's the complicated part that people don't understand when they hear stories like this. I hadn't stopped loving Elaine. I was just no longer willing to keep paying the price for it. She apologized for what she'd said about embarrassing her. She didn't apologize for not coming downstairs to defend me. And I noticed that, and I filed it away. She said her mother had called her every day that week, that Roberta had said I was volatile and unpredictable, and that the family was concerned about Elaine's safety. I had packed a bag, walked through a kitchen, and gotten in my truck. That was the full extent of my volatility. I told Elaine that if she wanted this marriage to work, one thing needed to change. I would not attend another family event where I was expected to absorb her family's contempt and say nothing. Either Elaine talked to her mother, directly, clearly, with no softening, or I was done. Elaine said she would talk to Roberta. She did not talk to Roberta. Or if she did, it was the kind of talk that changes nothing. because nothing changed. I gave it 3 months. I attended one more dinner, a birthday for Hugh in January, and within the first hour, Roberta made a comment about people who don't understand what it means to have a profession. She was talking about a news story or pretending to. But she looked at me when she said it. I put down my fork, excused myself politely, got my coat, and drove home. I filed the papers in February. People ask me if I regret it. I've been asked this question more times than I can count since the separation. By friends, by my own sister, by the mediator we went through before things were finalized. And I give them all the same answer, which is this. I regret that it got to that point. I regret that Elaine never found it in herself to stand shoulder to shoulder with me. I regret the years I spent in rooms where I made myself smaller and smaller, trying to be acceptable to people who had decided I wasn't before I ever opened my mouth. But the night I drove home from Georgian Bay, alone in the dark with the highway opening up ahead of me, no, I don't regret a minute of that. The house took 8 months to sort out. We sold it, split the equity. I took a rental in Mississauga temporarily, then bought a smaller place in Port Credit the following spring, close enough to the lake that I can walk to the water when I need to think. Theo never paid me back the $4,000. I didn't expect him to. Roberta sent me one email, about 5 months after I filed. It was 3 paragraphs long and covered a lot of ground. She was sorry if things had been difficult. She'd always considered me part of the family. She hoped Elaine and I could find a way through. It was the kind of apology that apologizes for your feelings without taking any responsibility for causing them. I read it twice, then moved it to a folder I never opened again. Hugh never reached out at all. There's one more thing I want to say about all of this, and I want to say it plainly because I've seen these stories told 100 different ways, and they usually land on something simple. The wife was terrible, the family was terrible, the man was right, end of story. I don't think it's that simple. I think Elaine was a woman who loved her family in a way that made her incapable of protecting the person she'd chosen. I think that's a real failure, and it cost us everything. But I also think she wasn't a villain. She was someone who had been raised in a particular kind of family, where Roberta was the son, and everything else orbited at a safe distance. And she had never learned to hold 2 loyalties in her hands at once. I think about the night she came upstairs and found me packing, and I think about what a different version of that moment could have looked like. She could have said, "Tell me what happened." She could have said, "I'll go downstairs and talk to my mother right now." She could have said, "I'm sorry, I see it. I've been seeing it for years, and I've been telling myself it wasn't happening, and I'm sorry." She said, "You're embarrassing me." That's the sentence I'll carry for the rest of my life. Not with bitterness, exactly, but with a kind of knowledge about what it costs to make yourself invisible in someone else's life, about how long you can do it before you stop recognizing yourself. I'm 53 years old, and I live alone in a house that I chose for myself, close enough to Lake Ontario that I can hear the water on a quiet night. I have dinner with friends on weekends. I take my kayak out on the lake in the summer. Last spring, I started volunteering with a youth mentorship program that works with kids in unserved communities across Peel region, and I'm better at talking to those teenagers than I ever was at a dinner table in Burlington. I don't know what Elaine's life looks like now. I hope it's good. I genuinely do. I know what mine looks like, and that, after 22 years of making myself acceptable to people who couldn't see me, is enough.